Are here today with Ray Good, a new friend of mine, and I actually have been kind of following along on some of his stuff on social media, and he runs a small business in the area, and he likes to share about his faith. So that's what we're going to talk about here today at Ferocious Faith. And so welcome, Ray. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I hope you all don't think differently of me after you start watching this.
Ray and I had a good discussion before I hit record, and I kind of got lost in the talk, and I forgot to hit the record button. So we're gonna talk about lots of different things. Hopefully, it'll be an encouragement to you. Hopefully, you might learn a little bit about faith. You learn a little bit about Ray. Ray does have like I said, a small business in the area, chainsaw carvings, which is really cool. And we'll talk about that. It's called Knotty Rays, right? That's what you call it. Knotty, like Knotty, Knotty Rays. And then he has a something I think God is trying to develop in him called Knotty Rays Life Compass, right? And he's working that in Ray's life. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but for right now, I want to ask you, Ray, when was it in your life that you realized that you needed God in your life? Like, for example, we always say in Christianity, the day you got saved, or when you gave your life to Jesus. Was it like a one-day event, like all of a sudden a light bulb went on, or was it a process? Or tell me about how that all happened for you.
Like I said earlier, I feel like I started off, my first interaction with God, honestly, was in a children's home. And I was introduced to God there.
Okay.
But when I come back from church, I was sitting there thinking about it. And the red and yellow, black and white, they're all, I remember sitting there. I remember this very well this day. And I'm thinking to myself, the Kellers of people as a kid, like 4 or 5 years old at the time. And this is like one of my earliest memories of life, actually.
Oh, wow.
But I was thinking about that. But then after I thought about that, I remember saying to myself, there's something wrong with somebody who would just say they believe in something to save themselves from being burnt. Like, God has the power to burn people. No, I believe. To me, that's what I was doing. That in my mind, that's what I thought.
Oh, that was the thought process you were having
as a young kid. Now, when I think about it as an older man, I'm like, what was I thinking? How was I thinking? Like, that's what I thought. Yeah, there's something wrong with this.
It was almost a fear rather than a faith. You were.
No, I had faith.
Okay.
I had faith, but I can remember sitting there thinking. I thought to myself, I'm going to keep thinking about this because, like, I thought about it for a long time.
What
I was just real young, like 4 or 5. I was real young.
You're going
and I went from there
wow.
to a foster care, and they were really faithful. They went to church all the time, and they were faithful. But I don't feel like I had like a relationship sort of thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying anything bad about them. I don't want you to get this wrong.
Right,
these were really faithful, good people. Mm-hmm. And when I went to live back with my parents, they were in the Baptists. And the Baptists, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing, I'm not saying there's wrong with any of these people, okay? Because I know it sounds like I say this and it sounds that way. But the Baptists seemed like they wanted to fry you hot enough that you were screaming for God before you got him, man.
Hellfire and brimstone. Yep.
And that wasn't for me. I personally feel that was detrimental. I don't feel like that. I personally don't feel like you should use perfect love casts fear out. It doesn't use fear to sell love. To me, that's a distorted way of selling salvation. I think that's messed up. Okay. I really do. And if you're into that, don't get me wrong. You whatever, here a little, there a little. Each person sells. Everybody's fishing for the same God, and He chooses everybody for different reasons.
Yeah, we all have different gifts and talents, and
but for me personally, so I went from there. And I, went back and forth to different churches on buses, and I started going to church by myself. Then I ended up going to a little church in Bigler that was Pentecostal. And they were whacked, man. I don't mean whacked like they were into it,
in
man.
A good way. Yeah.
Wow,
powerful.
I mean, they were into it.
Yeah.
And I remember this too. If I were saying there was a prayer that I did, it would be that night. I remember it plain as day. Mm-hmm. I remember, and must have been about 4th or 5th grade,
Okay.
somewhere around
So
there.
Still pretty young. Yep.
Yeah, and I'd already had multiple. I mean, by this time I know there's a God. There's not a matter of whether I know.
Mm-hmm.
But he's talking about Jesus, and it's just like he's like, just have him roll the stone away from your heart. And so I can remember. I as a kid, I know this sounds stupid. I probably should have been older in my mind than I was at the time. But I'm picturing it, man. I can see it, man. I can see like. My heart wasn't like a heart. It was like the real. It was kind of weird, but it was the heart.
No, that's what it is.
And I can like I'm picturing like even now I can still see that like on the movie, you know, where they roll the stone away, and I'm like, oh Jesus, come into my heart. I opened my heart to you, and he never walked in. You know, what I mean, he didn't show up on the side. I
You
thought
never got this big
kaboom. But that was one of the experiences, and then I went to church, you know, down the road from my house, and I ended up at another church that was evangelical.
Uh-huh.
That church is where I was probably introduced to the way I feel I accepted salvation.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't think that... I think when you're introduced to Christ, I think you're at the very, 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 very starting point of building faith. You know what I mean?
That's just opening the door and it's like, wow, all new stuff. And then you still got to walk forward.
So I don't really know when that time was for me, because by this time I know Jesus, I know God. I at this point in the game, I've already sought the Lord. You've already made
that commitment. It's like, this is what I believe, and that's it. Yep.
But I knew the Bible. By that time, I was reading the Bible pretty stout.
Mm-hmm.
And at that particular time in my life, I was just turning 21. But I was really into dope and drinking, and I was like really, really not like a heroin addict. You know what I mean? I'd do whatever was down in front of me. I was down with just about anything.
Uh-huh.
But I smoked a lot of weed, and I drank a lot of booze, man. I had a real problem with the rehab before I was even 21. I did a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, I was brokenhearted over this relationship that went south, and I had already read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I had already participated.
You already hidden that in your heart.
I already participated.
Yeah.
Okay. And what ended up happening was
God already had his hand on you, and he's like, okay, you're mine.
So I started going to church there, and they explain two paths. You know what I mean? Different. You can take your path in life, or you can take God's path.
Mm-hmm.
And it really resonated, because at that particular time, man, I'd been backslidden, didn't even know I'd been deceived. Didn't even know. I still believe in God, man. I was still talking to God. I was drinking beer with him, man. I'm smoking weed, and he's talking with me, man. Me and him I'm praying.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying you can confess Jesus all you want, but if you're not living the life, you're not saved, you're not operating in salvation, you're not set apart, you're not sanctified, you're not set free, you're not living a different life. There's nothing different about being high and talking to God than me being straight and talking to God, except that my sin is making it impossible for me to actually have a life that's operating with God. My sin is actually set. I'm deceived at this point.
Right, exactly.
So I start reading the Bible again. This time wow, man. I'm not eating. I'm like totally, if you could think about John the Baptist when they say that he was in the wilderness, or when Jesus was forced into the desert, into the wilderness, and he was tempted, it was like the Spirit just like swallowed me up. And I had no time for nothing else, man. That's all I did. I carried a little Bible in my sock everywhere I went. I knew inside and out. It was like, wow, man, I'm having a real interaction here. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Well, then what happened was I do my thing. Am I going too far with this?
No, you're fine. You go as far as you're comfortable
doing my
going.
thing, and what ends up happening is I fall away again.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know I fell away. In my mind,
Uh-huh.
I still believe in God. I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in all of this stuff, man. Mm-hmm. But I start drinking, I start partying, I start hanging out. I meet this chick who ends up being my wife. She ends up being my wife.
Uh-huh.
And me and her together for probably about 2 years. And whatever I would have to say somebody asked me to church, because I've always made a policy. If you ask me to church, I usually go to church. If I feel like, and don't just come running up and say, the Lord wants you to come to church, Ray. But in my life, that's what I've always felt. Like
Yeah,
if
you felt like God speaks through people.
Yeah,
and if that
Yeah.
opportunity is put in front of you, it's like, okay, that's God
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here praying to God, and Steve says, "Hey, Ray, you want to come?" You know what I mean? So anyway, I go to church, and there wasn't any real particular reason. I can't find any reason. I went to church that night, to my old church, and I go in. By this time, I have one kid. I have another kid on the way, and I come home, and I said to my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, I set my Bible down, and I said, "I don't know where where it went wrong.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what happened, but this is where."
At that point, you realized you'd gotten off track.
But that was at that point, to me, that's where I understood salvation, right there.
Okay.
Because I had lived.
You're either going to
I
commit
had
or you're
lived up
not.
and down.
Yeah.
It's like I said to you, if you stuck all the devil stuff here, all the deceit and all the lies and the drugs and the alcohol and the women, all the stuff, the fleshly stuff, and all of his stuff, and you stuck on this side all the integrity and the honesty and the good stuff that God has, we're all operating on both of them hands. We're picking. Before
we're
saved.
making decisions and choices every day. Yeah.
When you believe that God said this is the way that it is, and you said, "Hey, I believe what he says," you can still pick out of this hand if you want.
Yeah, God allows it. Yeah, he allows it.
But if you're sincerely looking for him, sooner or later, you're going to realize, I have to choose one of these. It's no longer inadvertently my flesh got the best of me. Jesus is going to forgive me at the end of this. I can do whatever I want. Sooner or later, you're going to push in, and God's going to say, "Don't tell me that you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Don't you tell me that you don't know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. And this is the way it is now."
You can see the difference now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I come back home and I said that to her, I was like, I don't know how I got so messed up. I didn't know how I got so sidetracked. I wasn't deceived, man. In that time, and when I was doing my thing, I'm not deceived. You know what I mean?
Well, think of it this way: because you were following that path, and God was allowing you to make those choices, in the back of our mind or subconsciously, we think, "Well, God's allowing it to happen, so He's cool with it." You know?
Yeah.
Is that the way people think?
But I don't know. I don't know how I was thinking. I honestly don't know. And this has been my story in life.
Yeah.
You can walk this way or you can walk this way. So I say to her that this is where my life is at. And she's like, "Wow, you must have had some night at church," you know what I mean? And I'm like, I can't even tell her. I don't, that's how
you couldn't put words to it. Like
you can't explain, unless you've been walking the right way. How do you know you know God? How do you know that you know God? If you keep his commandments. The only way to God, when people say, "Well, I accepted Jesus in such and such day," they were introduced to Jesus on that day. But the only way that I get to know God is through his way, his truth, that life. That's how I know him.
It's all about him. It's not what we do, right? It's like
so I wouldn't say
give
that,
it over to him. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that fall was good, but I had something so obviously contrasted at that moment in my life that I was like James says, the man who looks himself in a mirror and then goes his way and forgets what kind of man he was. That's the only way I can explain myself at that point. I'm like, how did I get so messed up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How did I fall and not even know? Like, I still believed that God was still I had the life that I was living immediately from when I said enough's enough and got right and did what I was supposed to do. Just like that. Immediately.
It turned.
There were two lives now, and I'm like, that one is so distinctly different than this one. I know. Now my faith has went from some little kid's faith to this other kid's faith to this actual alive thing that I can see the two right now. And then what happens? I get screwed over by a bunch of people at church.
Oh, no.
Seriously, just destroyed, stabbed in the back, stabbed in the face, stabbed every which way, and basically you had it coming because you weren't a member of our, and I put out money and time, and it was ridiculous how crappy this thing they did was.
Do you think that happens to a lot of people?
I guarantee it happens to a lot of people. Yeah. And so I get mad. And I'm telling you, I still, off and on, I still went to church. I still went to Bible studies. But in my mind, I never got over that. I have really fostered a lot of hostility about that, man. A lot of hostility.
Well, since then, have you found forgiveness for this?
Oh yeah, man. Since then, I'm like,
okay, good.
when it all happened, I was like, do you see what he did? Do you see what he did to me?
Mhm.
And I'm in this field and I'm so mad. And he's like, now you know how I feel. That's how I feel.
Oh, you're talking.
People do this. Yeah,
That's
people
how
do
God,
this to me
that's
every
how God
day.
spoke that out to
They
you.
do this to him every day. They build their
All
own
right.
little kingdom of stuff,
And then they slap God in the face.
and they put his stamp on it, and then slap him in the face and bastardize everything about him to suit their own end.
Uh-huh.
And that's
And
one of the
God deals with that all the time.
and I'm like, yeah, but you're different, man, and you can handle this, and I'm still mad. You know what I mean? I'm not like to him mad.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, I'm so bitter that I know me as a person. I had to get away from that. I had to get away from that situation.
So it wasn't affecting your relationship with God.
No.
It was affecting your
But what
relationship
ended up happening,
with the church,
yeah,
with the people.
with that person.
Okay.
I didn't want to go in there. I know me. At this point, I'm young, and I'm the kind of person. Me and you will have words, and that's cool. And if you want to start having more than words, man, that's cool too. Because I like to fight when I'm fighting.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to do that. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to back off of this.
Uh-huh.
And the whole time it's like, you need to get over this. You need to move on. You need to have the pastor call me. Hey man, this guy's no longer in the church. Why don't you come back? And I'm like, even now
Oh,
I could just
tell.
about cry thinking about this. It was so rotten what he did. But anyway, I'm going to a different church now. And then I start, this is a lot later in life now. I have 4 or 5 kids.
Okay.
I've been through, working like ridiculous hours trying to take care of her because my wife stayed at home.
Yeah.
That was a lot of stress.
You wanted to be the provider.
I had a lot of stuff going on, and then I start dealing with like stuff from my childhood. You know what I mean? Like stuff that I wouldn't even bring out to nobody just because I don't want anybody to know.
Right.
And I'm
Because
like,
you had mentioned earlier you were in foster care
so
for a
I'm
while
like-
and all that. Yeah.
so I'm like, I'm so mad driving my forklift around because I'm still not at this point. Now you fast forward in about 10 years of time
Okay.
of me
So-
still
so
reading the Bible, still
The
going to church.
the original offense that you had at church was when you were young 20s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about mid 20s.
You just really
Yeah.
committed your life.
I'm
to
still
Christ.
going to jails ministering. I'm still
Okay.
I'm still in the Bible, man. I'm still hot on the Word, man. I'm
But
real
then,
hot
but
on.
then 10 years goes by and
And I don't have a church really. I'm
Okay.
I'm just jumping from church to church,
Mhm.
and now I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff, and I'm driving around and I'm mad because what happened was I got sidetracked and manipulated in such a weird way that I didn't even realize what was going on.
okay.
And one day it was like, you still believe in me? Do you still believe in God?
Okay.
That's the question. Do you still believe in God? Yes, I do. And it doesn't matter if you're mad at him. It doesn't matter. Do you still believe he's the Almighty? Do you still believe that his way is the way? That faith that what he says is he's holy alone. Like alone. Whether you're mad,
There's
whether you
nothing
agree,
else on
whether anybody sold it to you the right way, it doesn't matter how else you get if you get this one thing, that he's alone, almighty,
That's it.
alone, holy. Nobody else. Nobody else beside. There's none like him.
Not
the
the-
nicest person you know, the best person you know.
Not the preacher on TV.
Nobody.
Nobody. Right.
In my head, I'm like, yeah, again. That's where I'm introduced to what I was introduced to within the last maybe 2 weeks. It does not matter what you think. It does not matter if you agree with the way he does it. It does not matter if you agree with the way he's being quiet. It does not matter that he was in the Garden of Eden. He was in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
He didn't take a walk and then come back. What happened? How? Oh, well, he discerned because they were wearing skin. No. He's everywhere,
He was
knows
there.
all things.
Yeah.
He wasn't surprised, but he was playing hide and seek then. And I'm like, what?
When he asked Adam, what happened? What did you do? God already knew.
Exactly.
He was pointing out to Adam, you know what you did.
Exactly. So I'm sitting here about 2 weeks ago. I'm like, where are you at? I'm irate, mad, because I'm screaming, I'm pushing in, and I'm doing what I'm
You're
supposed
trying.
to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's just not saying nothing. And then it's like this, Ray. You give up the dope, you give up the booze, you give up the lust, you give up all this stuff, okay? You keep pushing in, and keep pushing in. And sooner or later, Just like there's a certain point where he explains this is no longer acceptable.
Yep.
This is he told you small still voice, 1,000 different ways. He tells you what you're doing wrong. What one of the big things that was for me in my early 40s was anger.
Okay.
People love to talk about drinking, smoking, swearing, all the stuff everybody can see that there's something wrong with Steve. He gets high. Mm-hmm. Nobody can see that there's something wrong with backstabbing and gossiping and slaughtering people behind their back in the building. As long as you don't swear, everything's fair game. You can say whatever you want. You can be as rotten, scummy as you want to be. They're okay with that because, and they won't be though, if they have faith and they keep pushing in at God. At some point,
God's going to say, all right, that's enough.
With me, it was, I know I have an anger problem. I'm breaking furniture. I know I have an anger problem because when I hit the end with my wife, I'm screaming and yelling. I know I have an anger problem because I'm like, the wrench over there on the table.
Yeah. It was just instant snap.
Over and over and over and over and over. I'm writing down in my success plan every year, work on anger, work on being loving, because you want to work on take the bad stuff away and fill it with the good stuff. That's what my mentality was. I knew this for years.
Yeah.
And then I have this breakdown. I have a nervous breakdown of nervous breakdowns.
Oh, my.
And after that, about a week after, it took a while for my nerves to calm down, man, because I had like way high, and everybody knows me knows.
You're
off,
pretty intense.
Man. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I like about you.
So I'm getting in my car, and I realize I'm saying this all the time. It ain't worth it, Ray. Yeah. This is stupid. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to have a heart attack because your wife wanted you for the third time to go down to the dollar store and get some milk. You're going to have a heart attack.
Oh, man.
You're gonna ruin your marriage throwing fits over this stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not like perfect or anything like that, but I'm a heck of a lot better. And that's what it was. It was just like I said. I feel like there's the Holy of Holies, the inner, the outer. You know what I mean? The different parts of that old temple. I feel like that's what, for me, I'm pushing it. My faith forces me. It forces me to want to know Him more. Yep. And unless you have done that, you're not even beginning to scratch the surface of salvation, because it is a completely different way of life. And when people are like, how can you explain? I don't care to explain it to you. I don't want to explain it to you. I don't want to have to try to take all of that stuff and make it somehow a convincing argument, because I'm not that smart.
You can't condense that all down into a sentence. No.
All I'm going to say is, if you want something that's real, all you have to do is say, God, call upon my name, and thou shalt be saved. You might not like what you get.
You got to start that journey at some point. Yep.
But faith, to me, people think faith is believing this thing.
Just believing
faith, and they don't tell you that faith will faith is what sustains you through being slaughtered by people, by being beaten down, by having the enemy come in and just twist everything in your head and smash you all up inside. That faith that God is holy, that in the end of this, we're all going to Him, and that in the end of this, I will get the reward, and He will be there for me. He's there in that faith. That's stronger. That's stronger than some ideology, and that's stronger than people being able, well, you say the F word in church. These people's heads melt. Your faith can't handle profanity, then it's weak.
Oh, yeah.
As weak as you can imagine if you have that kind of faith. Faith has got to be the thing, the core thing that when you believe this thing, you will do this thing. Think about that. If you believe, people go to church every day, or to work every day.
To work.
Do you know how many people are going to wake up tomorrow? They've bought an apparatus. They've paid money to buy an apparatus to set in like in the house of preeminence. So you would have the kitchen and the bedroom in my house. That might sound weird, but that's what I feel like. You know what I mean? Those two rooms, the living room, whatever, we sit there and veg. But I'm going to sit that where I sleep, where I get all my rest and rejuvenation. I'm purposely going to buy this thing to wake me up with the most annoying sound in the world. Because why? Because I believe that these people said they would pay me to go to a job I hate, and I'll exchange large quantities of my life. Because why? If you didn't believe them, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
Your faith produced evidence and substance.
Yep.
Your faith that God said, this stuff here is what's real, Ray. This over here is all bad. what the devil has to offer you, and that faith that makes you believe him, he says the only way you can come to me is through Christ. The only way you can come through me, to me, is through him, through obeying him, through obedience to what he's done. That's all the victory you need. You don't need anything else except to listen to what he says and do what he says. You'll have a completely different life.
Obedience is better than sacrifice.
And what I get is people think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, is where I get a lot of trouble.
Okay.
I think at some point I'm going to be conformed in the image of Christ. I don't get proud. I don't feel like it's proud. Maybe it's arrogant, but I don't think it's pride. And it might be pride. I don't know. But it's like, I think at some point that I'm going to do all this. I'm going to do stuff. Because, man, I'm talking to God. Me and him are cool.
Okay.
Me and him we're tight.
You mean you at some point you think you're going to do stuff like perform miracles, and you're
Well, not miracles, but like I'm like, use me strong, Lord. Make me strong. And I don't feel. I think. I don't know what he thinks. Okay. And I have my own version of what I wish he would do in my life.
Yeah.
He hasn't been breaking trees off or making the earth rumble. But to me, when I hear people saying that the Spirit of God that literally created all this with his mouth, that word,
just out of his thought. Yeah.
this being is dead, come to life. It's not like, in the end of this, the devil's not like, bam, and God's like, oh, you got me, Lou. And then he's like, they're like punching it out.
Me, Lou.
You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, that was so close, you know, and he's like, every once in a while he's back. It's not like that. In the end of this, he's like, that's
done.
over.
You're done.
There's no fight. It's not some fight. It's not a duality. They're not banging heads. God's letting what's go on. He's letting that.
He's allowing it. Yeah.
So he doesn't operate the way I want. But to me, I get to this thing where I'm like, man, what if I can get a hold of that spirit that's inside of me? What if I can take that spirit and use that thing to to set people free and to preach the gospel and no, God, not just talk about the gospel, set the people free, man. I'm locked up and this guy's been in prison and bondage, and I'm like, you, in the name of Jesus, and I'm casting stuff out, man. You know what I'm saying?
You want to get to that point, or are you there?
I want it my way, but the thing is, this guy over here has a whole bag of tricks, man.
Oh yeah, and they're all meant to destroy that.
And he wants to get you messed up. He wants to get, the only thing that you or me have going for us is that Christ died to cover all the sin that we have till we get there. That's it. All that sin, as long as you keep pushing forward, so that faith, that is salvation to me. Salvation to me is being set free from a life. I can choose that life again anytime I want.
You can walk right back into it.
Salvation to me is that God said, till the day of Jesus Christ, until you were conformed into the image of my Son, until you were conformed into the... See Jesus over here, how he was? And everybody's like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You and me will be conformed into the image of sons of God just like him. That's what will happen. And the only reason that can happen is because he made it possible to be forgiven, to get grace, to understand what me and you are going through, and he said, I will do that until the day of, whether it's the day he comes, or to the day you become like him. All I know is that you will know, just as you are known, you will know. You will, in one moment, bam, just like that, in the twinkling of an eye, this mortality will put on immortality. This corruption will put on incorruption. That can't mean anything other.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
So down here, the only thing we can do is imitate what we saw him do and hope for the same. But in my mind, I'm setting people free, man. And he's like, they hated me, Ray, and you ain't any better. They're going to hate you too.
Oh, man, yeah.
And it isn't going to be all the, and maybe it will. Maybe it'll sprinkle a bone in there. But at this point in my life, I'm at one of them stages where I just went through like a 2-week absolute just smash fest in my mind. And what it really boils down to, is one, me hitting a place where God says, you'll fix this, or you'll stay right where you're at, and you can scream and you can kick, but you know what I said.
That reminds me
You know
so
what
much
I
of
said.
like a parent, a loving
Exactly.
father, and the child is throwing a temper tantrum.
Exactly.
I want it my way, and nope, you're just going to sit there.
You're going to figure
think
this
about
out.
what you did,
Yeah.
and then when you
And
get it right, you come on back.
And the worst part about it is I know it. I know it. And the other part of it is him saying, you are not going to on your own accord, Ray. It's like I'm that dumb sometimes. I am. I get so caught up in, like, honestly, I get so caught up in like the smallest amount of success for me is like, hey, we did that, Jesus, man. We're God and me are we're doing this thing, and I feel like my life is going to take off, and that's what I want. And I'll start thinking, man, what I don't realize is that if I'm not in the Word of God every day, on my knees praying to Him, talking to Jesus, claiming that blood in my life, when the fight shows up for me, I quickly forget. I'm not taking Him on. I can't take Him on. There's no possible. I don't have the mentality. I don't have the heart. I don't have the strength.
Well, it's been shown again and again in your life where you all of a sudden realize, hey, I'm off track, and I don't even know how I got off track. So the devil's so sly, and he can twist and turn things around until the next thing you know, you're useless.
Yeah.
And then you got to fight your way back.
But
to
you
where
know,
you were.
he's always, and that's the thing that's the thing that I would say. I keep forgetting that you guys. I hope this doesn't turn into like some goofy thing, and you guys like, man, what a guy. Man, I hope that doesn't happen. But anyway, if you're out there and you're having trouble, don't you ever doubt whether God is on your side. Don't you ever doubt whether, if you believed in God and you fell away from God, you remember this. He will perform it unto the day. The reason that you can be purchased, the reason that you can be saved, the only reason we can be saved is because what? Jesus came down here on a covenant that God made with Himself. He did not change His mind. He did not at one point say that blood doesn't, well, everybody but Ray and Tom over here and maybe Steve, those guys are questionable.
Yeah.
He said, until the day of Jesus Christ. If He said He's faithful because He's holy, because He's true, because He's just, because He can't turn around, because there's no shadow of turning, because He's the one who decided that that's how your sin would be dealt with. If you believe in God, you got no reason to worry. The only thing you have to worry about is obeying so that you can live in victory and figuring out exactly how to manifest the Spirit in your life that helps set captives free and encourage people that need encouragement.